Hello, everybody. John Hurst here, actor, singer, writer, political activist, and artist at large, with a political commentary posting today on the issue, not of police defunding, because I think that concept is flawed in that I don't think anyone wants to live in a community that has no one responsible for the enforcement of laws. But I think what people do want is a law enforcement presence that actually obeys the rules, follows the law, and doesn't brutalize and victimize people. But that's a whole nother discussion. So I'm just going to quickly say on that specific point, I believe that law enforcement in America needs to be dramatically restructured, redefined, and fundamentally changed. So I am in favor of redefining and redistributing the funding that many counties and states decide upon. Okay, well, that's actually not my commentary today. My commentary today involves a common strategy. And I think attached to the strategy I'm going to talk about in a moment is a troubling and truly morally dubious premise. So the strategy I'm talking about is that when a African American in America is killed under either suspicious circumstances or, in the case of Mr. Floyd, was literally executed by the police, the people who defend the police often attempt to bring up the victim's past as a way of discrediting them. Their argument is usually that, well, yes, the police did a terrible thing, but the victim was a career criminal, etc., etc., and they usually go on to then describe the victim's involvement with law enforcement or the criminal justice system in terms that are pretty unflattering and clearly intended to demean the victim and to provide political cover for illegal actions by law enforcement officers that are inherently indefensible. Now, the troubling premise attached, I would argue, to that argument is the notion that if someone has a criminal history, that they are therefore not entitled to due process, or that the police don't have the same obligation to treat that person, if they are going to arrest them or stop them, with the same constitutional regard and procedures that they would if they stopped someone or attempted to arrest someone with no criminal past. The point I'm making here is that it is not the role of the police to be judge, jury, and executioner. Their job is to execute the laws of this country, regardless of whether or not the person in question has a criminal past or not. And so the dubious moral argument that is attached to that is often embedded in the argument of those who invoke the criminal past of someone who has been killed by the police is that that person inherently does not deserve due process or the full measure of equal rights under the law in terms of how suspects are meant to be treated. Now, that is truly a not bogus is a poor choice of words, it is truly a offensive argument, because as terrible as the person may be, they still deserve due process. As awful as their crimes may have been, they still deserve due process, regardless of if their infraction was minor in nature, whether it was a misdemeanor or whether it was a major felony. The police still have a fundamental obligation to treat suspects and to afford them all of the constitutional rights that that individual is afforded under our laws and Constitution. So, to all my friends and all my moderate friends who are often tempted to invoke the victim's history with law enforcement or their involvement with the criminal justice system, I would urge you all to be mindful that in making that argument, there is an implicit suggestion that only people with spotless records deserve their full constitutional rights. Well, I don't believe that, and I don't think most of my friends do. And I don't think our founding fathers did. I think they designed a system that, even though they were racists and bigots and all kinds of things, they at least designed a system that, in theory, made it clear that law enforcement's job was to execute the country's laws, but not to act as judge and jury, and more importantly, to not parcel out justice in unequal measures. That is to say, they seem to make it clear that the job of law enforcement was to treat everyone and to afford each individual the full spectrum of their constitutional rights. Okay, so that is why I object to the strategy that is often used by conservatives to tarnish the reputation of victims of police violence, because there is an embedded suggestion in that only people with no criminal histories deserve to be treated and to have their constitutional rights respected. That is clearly not a credible argument. It is clearly offensive, and it clearly violates the principles for which we are supposed to stand. Okay, there'll be more music next time, and I wish everyone a joyous day.